Okay, good evening, everyone. This is another Wednesday evening here on the Clear Mountain Monastery channel, the YouTube channel. And we will be continuing to go over the Parisaññū Sutta, which is in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Sevens, Sutta number 68. And it's quite a fascinating discourse going over seven different proficiencies or seven different types of intelligence. And we've been going over them one by one over the last 3 weeks. And we'll continue today just as an overview of those seven different types of intelligence. The first one, which the Buddha mentions as being a skill of mind which is supportive of Dhamma practice. The first skill is Dhammic intelligence, Parisaññū. And that is, as it's defined in this discourse, an understanding and actually having memorized and learned lots of the Buddha's teachings, or at least a sufficient number of the Buddha's teachings. The second intelligence is Atthañū, A-T-T-H-A-Añū. So the knowledge or intelligence of the meaning or the benefit, what we called intuitive intelligence or translative intelligence. That's an ability to, once we've heard the teachings and we've learned what the Buddha has taught, then we're able to actually get to the essence of what that really means in our daily lives. The third type of intelligence is Atthañū, A-T-T-A, in Inya, long U, which is knowledge of self or intrapersonal intelligence. This is the self-knowledge and the knowing thyself, which is praised in philosophies around the world. In the Buddhist context, as we mentioned last Saturday, I believe, it's an interesting knowledge, an interesting type of intelligence, because on one level, it's a primary teaching of the Buddha that there is no self, or anything that we try to label with this perception self just seems to disappear underneath our feet. So that was last week's discussion. And this week, we're going to skip a few and go to the sixth type of intelligence, Parisaññū, which is also, Parisa means a group, and Aññā, as we've been mentioning, means knowledge or intelligence. So we can translate this as social intelligence or interpersonal intelligence. Both terms, social intelligence and interpersonal intelligence, are used in modern day psychology. And that will be the subject for today's discussion. And as usual, we'll give reflections for about half an hour and then open it up to questions. And people can feel free to post questions as they occur to you in the chat box in YouTube. And you're also encouraged or welcome to follow along in the discourse itself, which is in the notes in YouTube. Before diving deeper into what this Parisaññū, this social intelligence, means in a Buddhist context, just to mention those other intelligences. So we've got quantitative intelligence, Matthañū, temporal intelligence, knowing time, and a knowledge of distinction among individuals. That's the last type of intelligence. So those are the seven, and we'll jump right into social intelligence. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. Okay, so social intelligence, knowing different groups. I think it's useful to just read how the Buddha defines this in this discourse. So, how is a practitioner one who has social intelligence? Here, a practitioner knows social groupings. They think, this is an assembly of Khattiyas. So that is basically like the noble warrior caste at the time of the Buddha. So this is an assembly of warriors or of soldiers. Or this is an assembly of Brahmins. That's kind of the religious class, the spiritual class. Or this is an assembly of householders. Yeah, just normal people. And this is an assembly of religious practitioners, or samana is the word. And that includes both Buddhist monastics and, at the time of the Buddha, other wanderers and religious aspirants. And so one further knows among these, again, the Buddha just listed 4 different groupings here: Khattiyas, Brahmins, householders, and religious practitioners. Among these, one who has social intelligence knows one should approach this assembly in such a way. One knows one should stand amongst that assembly in a certain way. One knows how to act in relation to that assembly. One knows how to sit in relation to that assembly. One knows how to speak in which way with that assembly. And one knows how to remain silent or to listen in such a way amongst that assembly. And because one knows social groupings, that is, this is an assembly of Khattiyas, etc., ascetics, and one knows how to sit and stand and approach and sit and speak and listen, because one knows all of these things, one is called someone who has social intelligence. So that is the Buddha's definition of Parisaññū, knowing groups. And yeah, in preparation for this talk, I thought it would be appropriate to read up a bit on modern psychology, what modern psychology has to say about this interpersonal or social intelligence. There's a very good book by Daniel Goleman called Social Intelligence. And it does a very good job of describing modern research in psychology and neuroscience, and how that relates to the capacity and the skill, the finesse, the savvy around knowing groupings and knowing how to relate on a social level. One useful distinction that he makes in that book is between 2 aspects or 2 arenas of social intelligence. And the first one is just social awareness. This is defined as what we sense about other groups, our social awareness. So basically our ability to think that, when I approach this group, I should, be humble and, speak in this way. And when I approach that group, I should, comport myself in this other way. And in the Western scheme of things, it involves what's called primal empathy, attunement, empathic accuracy, and social cognition. Of specific importance is this social cognition, and basically how that's defined in modern psychology is almost exactly as the Buddha described it. It's knowing the social norms, and it's basically the social savvy in which you're able to discern social norms about a group. And so that's one arena, that's one aspect of social intelligence, is this social awareness. The other arena of social intelligence is social facility. So that's where you actually put your knowledge of groups into practice. And so in this discourse, the Buddha doesn't specifically say what you're supposed to do with this knowledge. So someone who is dhammaññū, or one who has dhammaññutta, so one who has this knowledge of groups, the Buddha just defines it as basically the knowledge. He doesn't in this discourse define what one does with that knowledge. And one might think that that would suggest that all you need to do is have this knowledge, and you don't need to necessarily be able to have the social finesse and skill to put it into practice. But there are other discourses where the Buddha describe, or the Buddha's own capacity and savoir-faire, his ability to just blend in actually with different groups is mentioned. One kind of very unique and almost perplexing passage comes in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. This is Digha Nikaya number 16. So this is the story of the Buddha's final months before he passed away. And here the Buddha is talking about, he's talking to Ananda before he passes away about how he would relate to different groups of people. So I'll just read that discourse. And this is really a beautiful picture of the Buddha's own social facility. Yeah, he both had the social awareness and the social facility, as we'll hear now. So, and I recall, Ananda, how I have attended to each of these 8 kinds of assemblies, that is, the assembly of nobles, of Brahmins, of householders, of religious seekers, the 4 great kings, so that's heavenly beings, the 33 gods, other heavenly beings, Maras and Brahmas, those are the 8 groups. So the Buddha recalls how he has attended to these 8 groups, accounting to hundreds of them. And before seating myself amongst that group and starting the conversation or the discussion, I made my appearance resemble theirs, my voice resemble theirs. And so I taught them the Dhamma and roused, edified, and gladdened them. And while I was speaking to them, they did not know me, and they would inquire of one another, asking, "Who is this that speaks to us? Is it a man or a god?" So that's kind of fascinating. Yeah, I mean, one reason why it's fascinating is that you have a whole genre there are certain teachings which talk about the Buddha's physical body as having 32 particular marks, which made him especially, physically dominant in a way. Actually, he had supposedly a protuberance, so a bit of a bump on the top of his head, as you can see in any Buddha statue that's made in the traditional fashion. He had this kind of white tuft of hair. He had, a body which was divinely upright. He had a chest like a lion and 32 other qualities, which are another subject for fascinating discussion and reflection. But given that those discourses exist and those descriptions exist, one would think that anywhere the Buddha goes, people would just recognize him. He goes among these warriors, and wouldn't they just recognize him that this is the Buddha, this isn't like a normal guy? So how I understand this discourse is maybe what we can call like the chameleon effect, or the ability to be a social chameleon, and not in the sense, obviously with the Buddha would have had no ulterior motives, although he is intentionally changing the way that he speaks, changing the way he sits and acts. There's no unwholesome intention. Yeah. So this is a very essential factor to realize. A couple things there. One is that it's possible and to just act differently and to still be honest within that way of acting. There's William James had a great quote, the philosopher, psychologist, kind of father of modern day psychology in the late 1800s, had a quote that was, "I have as many social selves as there are people who I interact with." And yeah, there's this modern idea in America that if you kind of adapt the way that you're speaking or talking or moving or whatever in relation in different ways relating to different groups, then that's somehow fake and you're somehow putting on a front. But yeah, that principle doesn't exist at all. Maybe why that could be problematic is if one is changing one's affect, changing one's bearing with an ulterior motive, which is self-serving or the like, or trying to get something for oneself. If one kind of relates to people in that way, then yeah, that has negative consequences. But certainly the Buddha was not doing that. And I think a good case could be made that we don't need to consider our actions in that way either. It's possible to be a social chameleon in a totally positive sense, in that we just, different groups have different norms. And the more cosmopolitan or the more groups that you know, the more your skill in this social awareness is really tested. So that was just one example of the Buddha's facility in talking to different groups of people. On that note, just thinking of Ajahn Chah, for anyone who's read his biography, you'll see many different instances of him, ostensibly acting differently with different groups of people. Like the Thai monks, maybe would always remark that Ajahn Chah always seems so jokey and so smiley with the Western monks, and the Western monks would say that Ajahn Chah always seemed more strict with the Thai monks, and that makes total sense to me. Is that different people and different groups need there are different skillful means to relate to different groups of people, and of course those are broad brush. All Thai people are all Thai monks. Certainly that Ajahn Chah was more nuanced in his social affect than that. If there was a Thai monk who needed to have a good laugh, he would certainly have a good laugh with them. Or if there was a Westerner who was maybe being too flippant, then he could certainly lay down the hammer if he wanted to. But it's this fluidity of presentation, which comes from perhaps a non-tight grasping to a sense of self. Like you have this, if you have a very firm idea of who your social self is, I'm someone who, always laughs in public, or I'm someone who never laughs in public, or I'm someone who is always the loudest in a group, or I'm someone who's always the quietest, or I'm shy, or I'm whatever it is, I'm outgoing. If you have this concretized view of yourself, then you actually start feeling dissonance. You start feeling a bit of a wow, kind of the magnetic fields. When you hold on to this sense of self presentation, and then you go and meet with a group that is maybe not on that wavelength, then you'll feel yourself being repelled, and they'll feel repelled by you as well, because you're not attuning to actually what is involved. And this quality of social facility is marked by synchronicity and skill in self-presentation. So Ajahn Chah, they would say he was almost like an actor. He could basically take on assume whatever role or whatever social front he thought would be useful to someone. So I think that's quite fascinating. So why is this important? And if it is important, then how does one cultivate skill in social awareness and social facility? Why it's important? One could argue, and I think many monks do, that it's not important. So for a monk, an ascetic, there are a lot of quotes in the Pali Canon that someone, a very introverted monk could point to and say, here, the Buddha says, this dhamma and this discipline is taught for seclusion, not for entanglement. This dhamma and discipline is taught for the sake of separation from the crowd, not for over-engagement. And could cite many other similar injunctions of the Buddha. But that said, you often can see the social, the social ripples which come when such a person with such a view kind of comes in contact with society. Because even as monks, we can't, as Buddhist monks, we have to have at least enough contact with society to go out for alms, which, a fair number of forest monks in Thailand, that is like the extent of their interaction with a greater society. But even for them, it just, the dissonance, the lack of harmony can be felt and can be seen almost if someone is just inflexible in the way they relate to other people. But even so, for monks, I would make a case that monks, as with anyone, it makes sense to try to have a more detailed, a more fine-grained understanding and appreciation of social environments, because you can't escape. We're social animals, and to greater or less extent, we have to have relationships with other people. And basically, this is your life. As lay people, you don't need to know the importance, you don't need to be told about the importance of social awareness, of social intelligence. It's a part of what will allow you to exist, without bumping up against things and people and your employers and your friends and your family. And when one is not bumping up to all of these different individuals in one's life, then when one comes to sit meditation, then the mind is peaceful. If you know the skills of social intelligence, you know how to mirror other people, you know how to display yourself, you know the display rules of different groups, you're able to accurately empathize with other groups of people, then it's just harmony. It's almost like other people become your object of meditation. So rather than thinking, I have my practice, which is half an hour on the cushion in the morning, 15 minutes at night, and then all the rest of the day, I just let it all go. During that half an hour, those 15 minutes, my object is the breath, and the rest of the day, there's just no hope. An alternative way of conceiving of your day is as taking your object as this other group. So there's something which is called Sangha-anusati, which is recollection of the Sangha. But I think, and that's usually defined, traditionally defined as recollecting the noble people who are enlightened. But I think, social intelligence, or just being able to attune to and pay attention to the people that are around one, can be a legitimate aspect of of mindfulness, can be a legitimate object of mindfulness, be it more amorphous than the breath at the tip of the nose. So yeah, hopefully everyone's convinced of the usefulness of social intelligence, but then how do you go about developing it? On this note, there's a pericope, which is like a stock phrase, which comes up all over the Pali Canon, and that is in defining someone who has precepts, defining someone who is moral. Specifically, there are said to be 5 benefits for the practice of morality, and that one is, good reputation is kept about one, and one doesn't get into various kinds of trouble. The 4th benefit, the 4th advantage of a moral person is that they are, and this is how it relates to social intelligence, a moral person is of confident deportment, without timidity or shyness, in every society, with whatever group, be they nobles or Brahmins, householders, and ascetics. And the opposite for someone who is immoral, for someone whose precepts are broken, they are timid and of troubled demeanor, unconfident, and without courage in every society, with every group, be they nobles, Brahmins, householders, or ascetics. And now this is fascinating. So this link between one's morals and one's integrity and one's social facility. And yeah, I can see how this, see the truth of this. When someone does have a sense of conscience, you have a sense of right and wrong, you have a sense of what's proper and improper, then however you spend your time, whether in public or in private, then the heart still knows if you are engaging in things which are appropriate or inappropriate. And even if you spend all of your day by yourself, but you're doing, you're kind of wasting your time or, doing inappropriate things with your time, whatever that might mean for you, or however you might feel that, then when you go out in public, when you go out to relate to people, there is this kind of non-click, like you're just not able to mind meld with people. And it's almost like, there's this sense that in your mind that I know that I was kind of wasting my time and I haven't been spending my time well. And when I relate to this other person, maybe they have been spending their time well, and maybe they might know that I haven't been spending my time well, and or I'm doing this immoral thing, XYZ. So I find that very, very fascinating and very accurate. That said, I don't think that's the end of the story. So I think as monks, we have lots of rules, lots of precepts, and we can keep all of the precepts, especially while we're alone. There's not that much, bad stuff that we can get up to, but still, like the sense of not spending one's time well, that seems to fit under this umbrella of, lack of integrity. But when you have this integrity, then there's this social confidence. But as I was hinting at, that might not be the end of the story. Even if have got very good morals and are really looking after your precepts, it might be the case that you still might not know how to approach this or that group. And in that case, you just got to train. You got to, if you want to, then just studying the group dynamic and paying attention, learning and watching and listening and seeing how groups interact, and then trying to match that and not be overbearing. So that's about a half an hour of talk, and I like thinking about this subject and really appreciate hearing what people's thoughts are. So thank you, everybody. See if we have questions. Okay, oops. I'll have to send a link later. Apparently the link didn't connect. It's called the Dhamma Sutta, Digha Nikaya number, Anguttara Nikaya number 768. And I will just put a link to that in the notes right now. Okay, so the first question. When someone is angry, they wish ill upon their enemy and are disappointed if they do well. This sutta includes a powerful set of verses. Is it possible that we have... Oh yeah, the link that you gave, Savaka, is actually 764. If maybe I misstated it. It's actually 768, the link that I put down. So yeah, the Kodana Sutta is about anger. Okay. Okay, here's another reflection. So we can have a cynical view of politicians who do this, basically who exploit the chameleon effect when they adopt the down-home lingo of certain audiences. Is theirs unwholesome since they are fishing for votes? Yeah, again, as with most answers to most questions in Buddhism, perhaps, comes down to intention. It really depends on what their intention is. Yeah, I could imagine people putting on a down-home accent without any specifically manipulative thoughts in their mind. But yeah, power and wealth and the whole realm of politics is just such a complicated realm. And yeah, really the worldly winds of praise and popularity can do weird things to one's understanding of one's own intentions. Yeah, because when you start relating to larger and larger groups of people, then you are getting data points, you're getting feedback from more and more people. And that may or may not be you playing to so many different intentions complicates your own intention. I mean, intention is just, a singularity. It's they're acts that we generate in the heart, and it's probably good to keep them as simple as possible. To the extent if one was fishing for votes or there is certainly an ugly side to people doing the chameleon, so to speak. Similar question. So intention seems paramount. Yep. Taking care to know your intention seems vital. Is this a function of mindfulness during engagement? Yeah, very much so. And this is another reason, another plug for formal meditation. When you're sitting down in a quiet room without any distractions, you're really able to focus on a particular very simple object, and you're sharpening this metta, M-E-T-A, this overarching skill, which then you can bring to other areas of your life. So the mindfulness that I have of the mindfulness that I have of the breath in the present moment is, in a sense, the same mindfulness that I have when I am tuning into what my intention is as I relate to someone else. And the clearer you become about your intentions, then the more, in a sense, the more you stop being so concerned about what others think of you. It's kind of fascinating and very relieving. It's like, oh yeah, I know for the whole time that I interacted with this person, I knew what my intentions were. There was goodwill the whole time and just wanting them, just wish for them to be happy. And then if something I said, if for some reason they misheard something that I said, and they get mad at me, then, if I care about the relationship, I can try to talk them out of it. But if it's someone who I don't need to have a relationship with, then I can just write it off saying, oh, I knew my intentions, and yeah, that's that. That's what's paramount. So. These are good questions. So another question. Ajahn, will you speak more about timidity and how it relates to humility? And is humility the default attitude to assume, no matter the social group one meets? That's a good question. So I believe the word timidity in that context, talking about someone who, actually that was talking about someone who was unvirtuous, who lacked integrity. So someone who lacks integrity, they are timid and troubled in demeanor in every society, in every grouping, whether they're nobles or Brahmins, etc. So I believe the Pali where there is monku, not related to M-O-N-K, but it basically means like abashed or shy in a in a way which that you've done something bad, so you're kind of ashamed. Ashamed is probably a better word than timid here. For the question about is humility a good attitude to assume in social groups? I think it is. I mean, even if you're a leader or even if you're in a management position, there's a whole genre of kind of managerial techniques around this idea of servant leadership. So you're basically someone who leads not from a place where you're lording yourself over other people, but are being humble. I know I remember reading a book that suggested bodily acts of humility or custodianship. So I think that's a good working hypothesis, that you work from a place of humility. I mean, again, as we've pointed out, like intention really is the is the most important thing. So what you ideally want to be accompanying your humble demeanor, your humble outward expression, is a humble mind state, which, basically the essence of humble mind state is knowing the truth of not self. So if you can know that, then you can even present yourself in a forthright and even commandative position. So there are times when, the Buddha spoke harshly to people. And when questioned about this, he said he knew the right time and place, and certainly knew his own intention. So, I think maybe even more than a humble outer deportment is just that inner insight of knowing not self, that really there's nothing that's worth being proud about here. Overly proud. If you tend towards self-hatred, then use pride as a skillful means. Be proud of the good things that you do, but know how to balance things. Another question. So this sutta mentions a distinction between those who practice Dhamma for their own benefit and those who practice it for others. How can practicing Dhamma for the benefit of others be put into practice? I think that might be a reference to a different sutta, but it is a good question. I will refer you to the Sutra on the Acrobats, which is a very beautiful instance of, there's an example of two acrobats, and one of the acrobats says to the other, I'll look after you, and you look after me, and then you'll be able to stand on my shoulders, and we'll do our trick, and then everyone will give us money, and that'll be that. But the other one says, no, I'll look after me, and you look after you. Yeah, so rather than I look after me and you look after me, it's I look after me and you look after you, and then we'll get down and get our money, etc. So the Buddha praised the latter perspectives, that and he elaborated that how does one, by looking after oneself, look after others? It's by the development, cultivation, increase, and plenitude of practicing wholesome mind states. And how does one, by looking after others, look after oneself? It is by the development of compassion and patience and a mind of goodwill. All right, so this might be our last question. We'll be going to the Zoom meeting. So just after this Q&A, the Clear Mountain Monastery, we have a weekly Wednesday evening Zoom conversation. So people are welcome to join that. And that's basically where we can talk to one another, and it'll be more back and forth. So I'll get the link for that here and see if we have time for another question. Here's that link to the Zoom address. Right, and maybe leave this question, this distinction of humility, not self, in the instance of simultaneously being forthright is great to consider. All right, cool, well said. All right, everyone. I really enjoy thinking about these things with you all together, and maybe see some of you on the Zoom meeting. And if not, then I hope you all have a good evening. And maybe see you in future YouTube conversations. We have Saturday morning talks at 10 o'clock and Wednesday evenings at 6. So good night, everyone.